You know, you've raised many issues, and I don't agree with everything you said.
Okay.
Mainly because you can take a boy from New York City, and he can be trained and function somewhere else.
The British tried with their boys from
well, that's
Kitson
true.
and everywhere, and it's
but
failed.
you know, when we look at the frontier, the northern frontier
And I'll
district,
give you some few links right now with a history that is very easily available.
Yes,
with you know, Hampton Finch, who the boyfriend of Karen,
yes,
who used to do livestock from and brought some cowboys to go and do, and they were all wiped out in there.
Well, but I also know that.
Okay, proceed.
But if you talk about counterinsurgency operations,
Yes.
if you focus only on the security aspect of it, which is important, you see, what we're looking at now, and this links into why there was an attack at Manda Bay on January 5th, is that Al-Shabaab has detected the weakness of the Kenyan state. After 8 years of its war on Kenya, basically from October of 2011 onwards, Al-Shabaab, with its constant attacks in the 5 frontline counties in close proximity to Somalia, including kidnapping Cuban doctors from Mandara town, and you know, they have now seen that the reactions of the Kenyan security forces is, to say the least, it's formulaic, it's desultory, it's counterproductive, as you've pointed out, by extorting the locals.
And going to the wrong people.
That's right. And also we have...
That way fill in the ranks of Al-Shabaab, because when you kill somebody's grandmother, for the heck of it, 82-year-old grandmother was buried. And
yes, I appreciate that. It does create a huge amount of resentment. We know for a fact that if you look at the Wagala massacre, where possibly at least 5,000 were killed at Wagala, you have 5,000 families still nursing grudges against the people in the same uniform.
Absolutely.
And the fact that nobody was ever punished, to the best of my knowledge, only one junior officer was sacked after Wagala. He ended up working with Bob Morgan Security as the building supervisor at Feta Towers. I met him there. And he was the only one. He was not the senior officer at the airstrip either. He was a very junior officer. And we have this history of covering up and not taking action.
Provincial commissioner at the time, who was called Benson Carrier, was there in this in the Truth and Reconciliation.
And we also know,
and he said he had no regrets about what he did. In other words, it's good game to kill every Somali and any Somali, because
there's a lot of people who don't
that
have
essentially is some kind of an appetite which is in the psyche. And if he still holds that today, then you can tell me about how united country we have today.
That's true, and when people say I have no regrets, that needs to be discussed.
Absolutely.
And
nothing was done to him because his
ethnic,
ethnic cousin is in the system that time and running the system itself.
But so let's keep in mind that sometimes after you have horrific systems coming to an end, or you have crimes against humanity committed, for example, under apartheid, that many of the members of the security force were basically, if they went before Desmond Tutu's commission, Truth and Justice Commission, they were given amnesty for their crimes. They confessed
but everything was...
And it was out in the open. That's
out
right.
in the open and never to be repeated, and some kind of a compensation also was done too.
But now we have a Truth, Justice, Reconciliation report
Nobody
here.
wants to take out the report.
You can have access to it on the internet. But you're not quite sure if that's entirely accurate.
No.
We know that some segments
were
deleted, were done.
Some of the commissioners quit.
The 3 foreigners left.
Yes.
They left after submitting their chapters.
Yes.
And they took off. Yeah. And so you now have the American Sly, I believe it is, just put out a book as well. I think it's important that because things are not discussed in this country, we don't really know exactly what happened, which is why we're running into a problem with this Manda Bay attack, because nobody wants to admit that the forces were not ready to repel the attack, but also how is it possible, if you have any sort of relations with the community in and around the Kenya Navy base, that nobody reported the fact that there were 30 to 50 fighters, that people were in fact making notes, that people who were making deliveries of supplies to the base, collecting rubbish, just the normal daily events that happen in and around a base, where you deliver food, you deliver bedding, you have tenders out in the local community for meat.
I want to believe most of the Al-Shabaab operatives in the Lamu area are actually Swahili boys from the coast, Bajuni, Swahili, and the rest of them from the coast.
Well,
and probably very little component of foreigners or Somalis in that case.
Well, that's true. I think it is very true now.
It's easy for such information to be accessed.
Well, in fact, you know, if you ever see the coconut plantations at the coast, you see the coconut palms, there are steps cut into them.
Yes.
And those coconut palms grow right up to the
base,
the Manda base, which means that every day somebody going up to harvest coconuts can watch planes taking off. And through the magic of iPhones, that almost everyone carries now, it's really very easy.
I just hope as a county insurgency they don't go and cut off all the trees now. No. and eliminate the livelihood of those people. Oh. That essentially then creates a very big pool of people who don't have anything to live on, but would rather join the Al-Shabaab now because they're out of bitterness.
Well,
I mean, everything we do always is shooting ourselves in the feet.
Very often that's true. In fact, we know that the people arrested in the aftermath of the attack by the Kenyan security forces were just farmers.
Absolutely.
From the air. They're
tortured most likely. And
I don't know about that.
Why did the Americans also miss out on having all that surveillance? Here they are taking off with planes and literally are in a position to zoom, or rather to target a very small thing like this cup of tea from the other end, from 30,000 feet above the sea level, or 15,000 feet above the sea level. Why were they not able to do that elaborate, powerful security surveillance setting in that place so that this kind of thing never happens?
Well, we'd have to ask the U.S. government what their mandate was. You see, I think it's you've raised a very important point. Were the U.S. facilities there to support the Kenyans in the war against Al-Shabaab within this country, or was it focused entirely on Somalia? There have been reports of U.S. personnel. And now, in the aftermath of the attack, we've learned that there are 350 U.S. security personnel permanently in
Manda Bay.
Not in Kenya. That includes at Nanyuki, co-located with the British. In Manda, where there's 120 Americans, there were other U.S. personnel who were training.
And we're just lucky that Al-Shabaab did not focus on those ones who were sitting in their tents.
Yes, I'm very surprised. They were hiding in the tents. So that it means that the tents are all sandbagged.
Yes.
That's cold comfort. I think, however, the aircraft were out in the open. There was no overhead cover, no revetments there. It was a peacetime, sort of like Wilson Airport, or like the airport that services Lamu Island, which is on Manda Island, just across.
Yes.
Very picturesque. You know, you take a boat, you take a dhow, and the thing is, what's very much a matter of concern is that the travel advisories put out in the aftermath of Lamu, of the attack in Manda Bay, the U.S. one was was mainly focusing on the Middle East. The British High Commission, or the Foreign Colonial Office, put out its travel advisory, which did a favor to Kenya's tourist industry by not putting Lamu Island off limits. Although it did say in its color coding that you need to contact the authorities to see if you want to go there. And also it said no overland traffic. The British government essentially said, do not go by land to Lamu. Well, what does that do for, now we understand why the Chinese stopped the work on the port and laid off 2,000 workers.
And literally just pulled out.
Yes, because obviously all of the logistics that comes for the Chinese construction operations comes from Mombasa. It comes up the coast. You know, since they don't have a seaport, there's no way to offload boats. So it's a chicken and egg.
The land.
They were using it, and we know that buses have been attacked on that road. And also, when Al-Shabaab attacked Kulbio on January 27th, 2017, roughly 400 or 500 of their fighters came up that road from the Kenyan side of the border and attacked Kulbio from the direction of Kenya, whereas the other half, the other 500 fighters,
came from the other side.
Well, yes, but the point, see, and what's interesting is it's interesting and very unfortunate for the policemen involved, a police vehicle from a border post responded to the attack at Kulbio and drove up into Somalia, and of course they ran into an ambush and were all killed. But I mean, it tells you how close that was to Kenya.
Yeah.
But also, more importantly, if you are in a base facing out Al-Shabaab, and people are coming from the Kenyan side, you would assume, perhaps, that they must be Kenyan security forces, not Al-Shabaab attacking from the direction of Kenya.
But not in
The
our case. I
ability-
mean, the whole, they are having this free reign
Yes,
of
they-
the area,
they
and they're
apparently
walking. By the
do.
way, they're not going around with Land Rovers or Land
Well,
Cruisers
they
or
actually
anything. They're just walking
they
around.
do use their technicals, but they don't use the technicals for attacks. They use civilian vehicles. They also use a lot of police Land Cruisers that they've taken. We don't seem to ask.
From the Kenyan police.
Oh yeah, when they overrun Kenyan police camps, which are all along the border.
Yes.
At every attack, when you read the newspaper articles, the reports of this, essentially, the police left.
Took off.
They left the scene and waited for the attack to be over.